At this time, I'd like to ask you all to stand for a moment of silence. Since our last meeting just over a week ago, the Attleboro School Department lost the head of its math department here at Attleboro High School and a longtime math teacher, Pat Izzy. So I'd ask that you please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the regular meeting of the Attleboro School Committee of Tuesday, October 11th, 2016. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. At this time, I'd like the representatives from Houghton Physical Therapy and Attleboro Bluefish to come forward for a presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you could all introduce yourselves, please.
My name is Tracy Lombardi. I'm from Houghton Physical Therapy.
Christy Batchelor with the Bluefish Swim Club.
Chuck Batchelor, Bluefish Swim Club.
Todd Houghton, Physical Therapy.
Jim Hawkins, retired from Attleboro High School.
Thank you.
We're here tonight to present the proceeds from the 2015 Rome Boulevard Road Race. And this year we had raised $4,600. And the proceeds that Houghton Physical Therapy and the Bluefish Swim Club raise, it goes to student user fees and to improve the pools. And this year, we did a good job as raising $4,600. So we always owe a special thank you to the Mass Teachers Association. They're one of our lead sponsors, as well as the Mass Teachers Association and the Attleboro Education Association. We thank the entire association for donating this money, but I want to give a special thank you to Jim Hawkins for helping making this relationship possible. And the $4,600 is divided in half. One half, Houghton Physical Therapy, along with the Mass Teachers Association, will submit that portion towards sports user fees, and the students that can't afford them, this will give the children a chance to participate. And the other half of the proceeds go to pool improvements. The Bluefish always aim to keep the pool safe and healthy environment for not only the Bluefish swimmers, but for all the students and the people that use it. And we could not have raised this money without our race committee members, which is Christy and Chuck and Todd, myself, along with Joyce Lombardi, Claire Gillespie, here she can stand, he's along with her husband, a wonderful woman, and Jim Hawkins and Martin Tye. We also could not run this race as smoothly as we do if it wasn't for all the students from the Student Council, Leo Club, and Bristol County Savings Bank. We have 60 students that come and help out. It's amazing. We couldn't do it without them. We have to have at least 35, 40 kids out on the race, the road for safety, and then for registration we need at least a dozen, and to hand out T-shirts and just help out throughout with maybe 400 people coming. They do an awesome job, so it's great. And we also want to thank the music department, the special needs department, the graphic communications. They all take part. And we had a group of singers that sing the national anthem. A funny, beautiful girl, I can't remember her name, but she was awesome, from the special needs department that helped us start the race last year. She was a riot. The graphic communications office always does a great job helping us print thousands of registrations. And I also want to thank Mark Hool and Principal Bill Rooney to help us spread the word. They really help us out. And we want to thank all of our sponsors, because without them we wouldn't be able to have the money to give the school. So I'm going to name them off. It's the Mass Teachers Association, the Attleboro Education Association, Bluefish, Houghton Physical Therapy, Sun Chronicle, for placing multiple ads for the registrations. They start doing that the whole month of September, and it really gets the community involved. And Bristol County Savings Banks, Sodexo, and Sun Chronicle, I just said that, Dion for making all the medals, DP Sports with race setup. They help put the course together the day before, and he's always doing the split timing, so it's great to have him help out. And let's see, Honeydew Donuts, Clam Shack, Briggs Corner Pizza, Mediterranean, Wampanoag Roadrunners, Whitson's Food Service, Butler Gymnastics, Bliss Brothers Dairy, Stop and Shop, Attleboro and South Attleboro, Poland Springs, The Runaways Store, BJ Wholesale, Sharon Driving School, Pleasant Street Auto, Mommy Doodles, and Dale's Lemonade. So without them, we couldn't do it. And thank you. You want to say anything?
What do you want to say?
Yeah.
I just, it's a really fun event that Bluefish have really enjoyed over the years. Initially, when Jim ran it, we participated, and then later on we got involved with helping to run it. And not having it this year because the finances didn't make sense was kind of a loss for all of us. So we're brainstorming to try to figure out a way to keep it going. It doesn't make any sense to do it at a loss because then the whole purpose of it, other than it being a wonderful kind of community event. Not to digress too much, but I had a neat experience for myself today. I was getting my hair cut, and it was actually an Attleboro graduate, and we were just chatting. She saw the Bluefish. She'd heard it. She wasn't a swimmer, but she'd heard of the Bluefish, and I kind of felt more of a member of the community than I have before just because of that experience. So it was kind of neat. So this is really something that we enjoy and hope to not only continue but make a bigger check.
Yeah, I agree. How did you want to say?
I just want to say, thank you to everybody in the community. It's just been such a great event for so many years. All the volunteers and staff, the students that show up, all the different clubs that help out, the Bluefish and us, and it's been a pleasure again to work with Jim, just to continue the race on. So, like Chuck said, hopefully we can continue to go forward doing that in the future.
This race started in 2005. Jude Dyer just happens to be here. She believed me that this was something that would actually work and we could actually make money doing this. And what I discovered running it was a wonderful community in Attleboro. Two of the major sponsors right off the bat was Houghton Physical Therapy and Bluefish. Both volunteered to sponsor. I didn't even ask them. They wanted to sponsor. They wanted to be part of the community. And all the sponsors over the years have been more than willing. And the other thing is it's fun to work with the students. The students really enjoy this. It really is a fun event. It is sad that it isn't going to happen this year, but we've had a good run. So, and the teachers have always supported it. Gene started when it was just the AEA. I was able to bring the Mass Teachers Association along. They gave us a very generous check last year, and I'm sure that will continue.
If anybody wants to help out, maybe help us out to start another race for next year, we more hands the better. So anyone even watching on TV want to contact us, you can always contact Houghton Physical Therapy on our website and let us know that you're interested in helping out.
Thank you all very much. As Mr. Hawkins said, this has been a long time event now that's very helpful to the schools, especially this year with the increase in athletic user fees. This help will be even more impactful than in the past. So thank you again.
Yeah, we do want a picture for the Club Chronicle.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All right, so.
Did you get it too?
I got two.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Big check.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Would just take the picture again, I guess none of us were looking. Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Where were we supposed to look?
Not letting you do it anymore.
Yeah, we're gonna take it up.
You were warned.
Come on, Steve.
Try it again.
Yeah, one more picture.
Another one?
Yeah. They weren't looking at the right camera.
Okay.
Oh, we weren't.
No, we were all looking down.
We needed to say cheese or something.
Yeah, all right.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Here we go.
Thank you so much.
You're not
I forced
flash,
you
you
into
don't
that.
need to-
Thank you.
We were all looking at
Sorry. Sorry for the intrusion.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Right. Next on our agenda, we have our Student Advisory Council update from Student Representative Harry Lancaster.
All right. Hello, good evening. I just wanted to open up my statement saying that how grateful I am of being able to attend the envisioning workshop that we had at Cincinnati a few weeks back. After talking to my council, some of the other students in the school, we feel that the students really made their voice heard. SAC. We're pretty much, we have, our main initiative is without the greenhouse. We need to raise some money for new greenhouse panels. So pretty much all we have going on right now is the bouncing around on fundraising ideas. We've had a couple okay by Mr. Rooney. A few have been declined. So that's where we're at right now. And we'll keep you guys updated on how that goes in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we have minutes from our September 26th, 2016 meeting. Minutes should have been circulated with your packet. Motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to our consent agenda. Motion to accept 16 NOR TY 1000 laptop caddy carts, total value equaling $1,726.88 from North Attleboro Natural Lawn of America to the Willett Elementary School.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept the donation of dictionaries for all third grade students in the Attleboro Public Schools from the Attleboro Lodge of Elks, number 1014.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation for the total amount of $1,125.03 from Mark Cooper to the Attleboro Public Schools for educational needs.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $12,000 from the Feinstein Foundation, broken down as follows: $5,000 to the Studley Gifts donation line, $1,000 to the Thatcher Gifts donation line, $5,000 to the Brennan Gifts donation line, and $1,000 to the Wamsutta Gifts donation line.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That concludes our consent agenda. Moving on to our business agenda tonight, the first item is our spotlight event for Coelho Middle School. At this point, I'll call up Principal Bowles, Vice Principal Atkinson, and their team.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I want to first thank the Attleboro School Committee for allowing us to give this presentation tonight. It's a great event in which we get to showcase Coelho Middle School and the great things that are happening. I also want to thank Superintendent Sawyer and Assistant Superintendent Lori Regan for allowing us to be up here and working closely with us to show you once again, the wonderful things that are happening at Coelho Middle School. The first thing I want to point out is our new logo that we have designed. Sue Casey helped design it. It's a more aggressive cougar than we've seen in past years, so we are very excited about that. So I want to publicly acknowledge Sue Casey for her hard work on one of our logos. Tonight's spotlight is focusing on student and community engagement.
Have the clicker.
Oh, do I have to click? So, all the work that we focus on is comprised of 4 major components, which is derived or encompasses the strategic plan. That is essentially the essential beliefs, the mission and vision statement of the Attleboro Public Schools strategic plan, along with the district learning priorities and the student exit outcomes. As you can see up here, the mission statement is clearly written and bolded in certain aspects. And this is one of the professional development activities that we took part in last year, as we took the mission statement of within the strategic plan, and us as a faculty highlighted the key terms that were relevant to us and what made our work most important for the students and the community. So you see things there like relevant learning experiences, things that engage, challenge, and inspire our students. And the key word there is to maximize their unique potential and essentially improve the world that we live in their world. These are the things that we live by, these are the things that we honor every day, and these are the things that we work towards every day, because it's all about the students and it's all about their educational needs. We demonstrate this through a variety of different things, but essentially it comes down to 2 basic factors: the district learning priorities and what we want our students to be able to demonstrate as they exit the 12th grade here in the Attleboro Public Schools, and how we at the middle school can foster that for the kids. One of the other things that we'd like to show is that engaging these students in the community and in everyday schooling is very much different than when we may have gone to school. And we need to start to think outside the box in the way we engage these students. The world that we grew up in is not the world that they're growing up in. And we have to utilize the resources that are around us to make sure they're engaged in their learning so they see the impact that it has for them. So what does it mean to engage our students? We believe that engaging our students is in the academic and social setting. We believe that this allows them to make a true connection to the Coelho Middle School and also the Attleboro Public Schools. But it also makes a bigger connection to the Attleboro community as a whole. They see their relevance and their importance in the school community, the district community, and the community in general. Why do we want to engage our students? Simple reason. It gives them a sense of purpose to their own educational pathway. It allows them to dream about what they want to be and sees the importance of making relevance out of their own educational experiences. Without students becoming engaged, they often will not reach their fullest potential. We have the task of making sure that they are engaged in all aspects of their educational careers, whether it is that social setting or whether it is that academic setting. And that is a challenge. So how do we do this? One of the first things, and we'll talk about it in more depth with the wonderful staff that has come with me today, is how do we engage them in the community? This is one of the biggest factors of what makes a Coelho Middle School student. The first and foremost is the wonderful work we do with the DARE program in the 5th grade. The DARE program has been a wonderful program where we educate students about drug and alcohol awareness and how we can use Attleboro Police Department as a facilitator to students to make sure that they know what needs to be done in order to live a safe and healthy lifestyle. This is one of those programs that one time we thought may have been cut, but thank goodness it has not, because you see really the kids enjoying the program and what effects it has positively in the community. Other things that we have done, collaborations and learning, and we're going to talk about this a little later. Sue Casey and Kelly Bergeron are here on how they worked with the Attleboro Public Library in this year's Big Read and how they took a community field trip and took wonderful pictures and experiences throughout the city of Attleboro. Last year we implemented with the Bristol Community College the VEX robotics program, which we'll be doing again this year. We just started out our first year last year, and we actually, one of our teams placed 4th in the competition. These kids build their own robots, program their own robots, and compete with their own robots in competitions across the state. which is very innovative. And then Mr. Ben Harris last year did a Renaissance fair, which showed kids what it was to live in Renaissance times. You know, oftentimes they read about it in a book. It's a great experience for kids, and it shows them, you know, it's something tangible for what they've learned in the classroom. And they got to eat well that day. Another great community engagement is the Feinstein Foundation. As you can see just on the agenda, how that collaboration has fostered a healthy relationship. It also has brought money into the school systems to do a lot of the extras that we would not be able to do for our students. And lastly, our site council and our PE leaders, Mr. Robert McAvoy is here. He is one of the head of the PE leaders. This gives us students a voice. This allows them to see that their actions do have a positive effect on the school community, and that they do have a vital role in how the school community leads itself in the direction that they want them to lead themselves. Mr. McAvoy will talk more about it, but essentially the PE leaders run a lot of the after-school activities and the fundraising activities, and they're the leaders amongst the building, along with the site council. The site council this year will be charged with making monetary decisions based on the student activity funds, where they want to purchase things for the school, which is in the best interest of the students. That's their voices first and foremost. That's not a decision that I make, it's a decision that they make, and they get to see the outcomes in a positive light of that. So, how else do we engage students? We try to infuse technology at every cost, or every aspect of the school day. This year, well, let me first start. 3 years ago, with the help of Mr. Stores, actually, and the technology foundation that was set up for Coelho, there was fundraisers set up to purchase Chromebooks and other technology in the building, which we hadn't had in years. To this day, we were able to purchase 2 Chrome carts in the amount of 60 Chromebooks for the students, in the hope that this year we'll purchase almost another 100 Chromebooks for the student body population. Over the last 2 years, we've also made an initiative to give teachers the resources that they need to enhance the engagement of the students. We've purchased 25 document cameras, or ELMOs, and LCD projectors for almost every classroom in the building to enhance the engagement of the students and to provide digital resources for the students. And then also another wonderful platform that we started to use is the Google platform, where kids start sharing and using Google as a way to research and share ideas, and to share practices in the classrooms, and share feedback with their teachers instantaneously. For instance, in Mr. Ben Harris's social studies class, they do not need to wait a week before he grades an essay. It's a live version, and he can edit it as they're typing away and give them positive growth-producing feedback. This is engaging to them. This is what they want to do. And the last thing we tried to do was a little bit of a risk for us. We were always, sort of told, don't let kids use their cell phones. We want them to. We want them embracing their own uses of technology. So many of the classrooms now, we allow them to use their own personal devices to teach them about digital literacy and responsibility. If we are truly to believe that no child should have a Facebook account until the age of 16, we're lying to ourselves. But what it is our job is to teach them that social responsibility and how to be responsible for it. And when they're researching things, research things that are credible, not just what they find miraculously on the web. So these are the reasons why we want to embrace that idea of using that technology in the classroom. All right. And this is where the real work comes in. It's personalizing and giving them experiential learning opportunities. And how we do this is through a number of ways. And I'm going to turn this over to the wonderful staff that I work with. We have a number of initiatives going on in the district and also at Coelho Middle School that allows us to give kids a personalized learning experience. The first one is the PBIS, which Mr. Kevin Atkinson is going to talk briefly about.
Good evening. So right now, Coelho Middle School has a team being trained in PBIS, and PBIS has demonstrated over the years to not only decrease inappropriate student behavior, but also to increase student engagement. And it does so by not punishing students for negative behavior, but by recognizing and reinforcing positive behaviors. It gives students more of a say in their school community by giving them the opportunity to model student behaviors. And so it's more of a teaching platform than it is a punitive measure. And it's, again, about educating students in what positive behavior should look like. And I'm going to ask Mr. McAvoy to expand on that a little bit with his PE leaders.
Yeah, the PE Leader Club is designed to get students engaged, involved, and provide them learning opportunities within school. The club is open to 7th and 8th grade students. If they're interested in the club, they apply for the position. They fill out an application, they write a cover letter, just like they would for a job, on why they're a good candidate. If chosen, how will they demonstrate being a good role model in school, and what experience do they have that make them eligible for the position. Once the teacher I work with, Becky Hindle, and I decide on the PE Leader Club and who's in this club, they're responsible for creating, organizing, planning after-school activities, fundraisers, whether it be Hoops for Heart, our student-faculty basketball game that we hold at the high school, which is probably our biggest student, community, faculty involvement within the school. They also provide dances they come up with. They have socials, which are all fundraisers for the PE department, and they work hand in hand with our PTO to get these things accomplished. So when we have an event like the faculty game, they're running the event. They have their shirts on, and them with the PTO organize and run the event. In addition, our PE leaders, we hold them to the highest standard. We want them to be positive role models in school, whether that be we partner them up with a 5th or 6th grader that may be in need of a big buddy to help them out, whether it be just demonstrating themselves in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the classrooms, academically, in a positive way. And that's kind of what we look for in our PE leaders and how they conduct themselves in the school as well as in the community as well.
And just to add to what, thank you, Mr. McAvoy, and just to add what he's saying, tomorrow night we have a PTO meeting at our school. We have 3 PE leaders that are going to go to the PTO and explain how they're involved to the PTO. They weren't told to go, they asked that they could go. You can ask Mr. Atkinson and I, for the last 2 weeks, part of the application process is we are the final signatures for them to be approved to submit their applications. I think combined, we've signed over 200 applications for kids to be a part of the PE leaders. This is that engagement piece, that civic engagement. And one of the greatest things that Mr. McAvoy said, it's those 5th and 6th graders that might need a big buddy, who may or may not make a connection with an adult, but could make a connection to a kid. And that way it comes full circle, so when they get older, they could give back to their sense of community. So this is how this all plays into being a part of something special and being engaged in something. It really is a truly dynamic group of young student leaders. To see their energy running around the building trying to get 8 signatures, and I got to get my essay in first, I want to be on the top of the list, or a 5th grader that comes in the first couple weeks of school and hears about the PE leaders because of older brother and sister and say, I want to be a PE leader. I'm like, well, you have 2 years. Like, what do I need to do, Mr. Bowles? And those are the good things that we often don't showcase or talk about, but it needs to be discussed because this is what makes a well-rounded child. Next, one of our initiatives that's been a great initiative at the Quella Middle School and as the district as a whole is the UDL initiative, Universal Design for Learning. This is our 2nd year of our initiative. The team that is comprised at the Quella Middle School, I would put up against anybody. They are wonderful educators who care and are compassionate about students, and they really have the ability to think outside the box in ways that they can engage students and assess students in their performance. To talk about that is Mr. Andrew Ben-Harris. He is one of our grade 7 social studies teachers, so I will turn it over to Mr. Ben-Harris.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm here to talk a little bit about our implementation of UDL, which is the Universal Design for Learning. To break that down a little bit, really what it means is that UDL is the idea that every student has something to bring to the table in the classroom, and there's so many barriers, physical, mental barriers that stand in the way of every student being able to achieve the end goal, the objective. So we put an objective out there in the classroom, and the goal is every student has something that they can bring to the table to meet that objective. And like Mr. Bowles said earlier on, we're living in an age where things are a lot different nowadays, and for us to just have one standard protocol that the students need to meet to achieve that objective, it isn't really fair to them, because each kid brings so many different aspects to the table. So my job as the educator is to kind of plan so that there are a lot of elements that the students can choose from for a lesson. For instance, one of the lessons that we worked with last year, I taught the bubonic plague, and it's an interesting lesson. And what they had to do was, the objective was, students will be able to explain the impact that the bubonic plague had on Western Europe during medieval times. How they went about achieving that was based on them. They were given certain options. For instance, they could create a menu or they could create a flyer or a medical report or a poem. So they created a game board. Some students created, there was a medical report and there was a poem, there was one more. There were many different options, but how they displayed what they did was amazing. They were given different ways to get there. They could use the Chromebooks, they could use the encyclopedias, they could use their textbooks. So it wasn't just you're gonna look on page 32 and you're gonna tell me about what happened. There's so many different facets that they could go through. So we used that last year, and I was on a committee along with Laurie. We went and we learned about UDL in the classroom. And this year we're working on phase 2, where we want to share it with the rest of the school and model what a UDL classroom might look like for some of the other teachers, in hopes that all teachers are implementing this in their classroom by the end of this year. Because really, like Mr. Bowles said, there's so many different avenues for students nowadays that for them to just be given one practice, it's just not fair to them. So we're infusing a lot more technology. We're eliminating barriers within the classroom. In my classroom, I've created, I call it a genius bar. Like Apple has the Genius Bar. I have some iPads that I have out there, and the kids know that if we're researching something, they got the encyclopedias on one side of the classroom, they got the Genius Bar on the other side, they got their textbooks. So I don't have to tell them, all right, we're doing this today. They know there's a million different options out there. And I think that they feel much more immersed, the students. They take a lot of ownership in what they're doing, and I see the end result is they seem to be a lot prouder of the work that they're doing. So.
And just to add to what Mr. Ben Harris has been saying about UDL, I think we as a culture have gotten into the idea that paper and pencil tests are the only ways to assess students' performance. And we do not believe that as a district. We believe that there are multiple means of assessing student performance, and that paper and pencil test may be just one way of it. We need to encompass students' creativity and the way they think into the way we assess them also. And that way, we do not negotiate on what we expect out of them, but the means in which we get there is very negotiable, and that's the biggest thing. Catering to the students' needs and also their positive way of encompassing what is expected out of them, meaning, whether they just decide to do a project, to do a video, or do a board game. The end result is still the same, the understanding of how the bubonic plague had a negative impact on Western civilization. So those are that is a great initiative that we're hoping to spread to the rest of the faculty. And as the leadership in the building, instead of having typical faculty meetings, the way we'll engage the students is we're going to be focusing on UDL through our faculty meetings to have sort of a professional development throughout the year as a continuum for them. The third thing on the list, which was a great initiative set up 2 years ago now, was engaging and personalizing learning for the students, algebra at the high school. So far, the last 2 years, I believe we've had 18 Coelho Middle School students have the experience of taking algebra at the high school level. The feedback that we've gotten from the students and the parents has been overwhelmingly exceptional. Kids are looking forward to be a part of this program now. I think it's a program that really allows students who learn maybe at a faster rate and to get that experience to go up to the high school level and be with other high school students. And every day, the students come back and they become immersed back into the 8th grade regular classes. And there is no really sort of separation of like, oh, well, you're the high school students coming back down. It's just they get a different experience of it in general. In doing this also, it allows us to open up some more seats going from 7th to 8th grade, knowing that some students may go to the high school and take algebra. For students that may have not qualified for 7th grade pre-algebra, but are willing to do the work over the summer to get into the algebra class as an 8th grader, which shows the drive and the determination of these kids, which essentially is their level of engagement. And that's what we want to foster as they transition up. One of the biggest things that coming to the Attleboro Public Schools was learning experiences within the community. And if anybody knows Sue Casey, she is a big, big supporter of this. And one of the things she brought me aware of was the Big Read and giving kids experiences throughout the community based on those things. So this year, Sue Casey, and last year, Sue Casey and Kelly Bergeron have made it a point to do this consistently and give kids a wonderful experience. They actually brought some examples of the work that the kids just had done. So this year, how many kids went on the field trip so far? 60. So they brought 60 kids out into the community to experience all the wonderful things that Attleboro has to offer that some of them may have never experienced or known about. So I'm going to let Sue and Kelly talk about their recent field trip and their experience learning opportunities for students in the community.
So,
No, I'm getting up.
we're fine. So this all sort of stemmed last year with Lori when she had the big idea, the big read, to do the unit from the Department of Education, which was David Macaulay's Cathedral. So the year before, she said, you know, do you guys want to think about doing this? And unbeknownst to her, we took the ball and really rolled with it last year. We took the entire 7th grade 6 different times to St. John's Church. And the students did a combination booklet with Mrs. Bergeron and Mrs. Latham and myself, where they really got a visual image of what a miniature cathedral, if you will look like. So they did a lot of architectural stuff with me in the art room, and then they did some textual pieces from the book with Mrs. Bergeron's classes. So I think Lori found out that we took every single kid, and she said, you took everyone? And we discovered the Gaffer bus, which was an amazing thing, that if we put 4 quarters in a kid's pocket, and they could get on right outside the school, we had to make sure that they didn't put all 4 quarters in, that it was not a round trip fare, that it was 50 and 50. So we did burn through a lot of quarters as teachers, but they were very, very nice about inviting us to the church last year. So when the Big Read piece came up this year, each year I've been fighting, if you will, to try to do a junior version of the Big Read, and it's difficult to try to fit it into the curriculum, especially our first month of school. So we decided to partner up with the Big Reads book, and we went with Seed Folks, which was a junior version of this whole idea of characters in their community. And I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about her idea with the garden, community garden, and I'll end with the museum piece.
Yeah, so Seed Folk has a lot of the similar theme as the Attleboro Big Read, the beautiful things that heaven bear. It was a little too advanced for the middle school students. So we chose Seed Folk, which is about a community that's kind of got a lot of different cultures and ethnicities, and none of them really know each other, and they just kind of exist within this community. And then one girl plants a little lima bean plant and starts this whole community garden, which brings everybody together. So we were brainstorming over the summer, and I said, well, obviously, if we're going to do this, we have to have them plant something. So I currently have about 132 marigold plants on my windowsills right now. They're like, I need to replant them too. They're getting so tall. So I chose the marigold because I had read, it was kind of a way to introduce symbolism as well, because Seed Folk has a lot of symbolism of the different cultures and stuff in each of the little vignettes that it talks about. So the marigold is symbolic because, which I didn't really know this because I am not a gardener by any means, but if you plant it with other vegetables, it can help protect them and keep the bugs and animals away and the pests, sorry. And so I wanted to plant marigolds, and we did a writing piece about who is your marigold, who helps you grow, who is by your side to, protect you. So that was kind of a nice way to get to know them. This was all around the second week of school. So it was kind of a nice way to get to know them, get to know each other, and to build our community. And it's still, every day they come into my classroom and have to check on their plant because they're all labeled with their names. So it was really nice on the field trip. And so we'll talk more about the museum visit, but we also we figured while we're there, let's go visit the community garden, the Attleboro Community Garden, and probably 75% of my kids didn't even realize there was one. I didn't know there was one before this. So they got to walk through the community garden, take a bunch of pictures, see what it was actually like, see how big it was, see the different things that were planted there, and there were actually a lot of marigolds planted in each of the pots to sort of protect the vegetables, which was a really cool thing. So they saw that connection, and it was like, it clicked for them. And, to see that in their own community, it really helped to connect them to the book, and also just to ELA class as well, because sometimes it's just in a book, but to see that in real life and how it's like right in their own backyard was big for them, and I feel like it really helped to engage them. So, and then we went to the museum, which was another big connection.
Again, Mr. Wall said earlier, the relevant learning experiences, and I think that having students get on a bus in a community setting and say, these people ride the bus every day and we have to be respectful because 35 kids just get on this bus and freaked everybody out. And walking through town and how we're respectful about people in our community, and it was cool. We had the bus drivers who have befriended us now, and
Yes.
One of the police officers from town stopped and they took his picture. It was like the paparazzi going through town. But it was just really great to see through the kids' eyes what they saw as these neat photographs. I gave them to Lori in a package over there to look at. But we had kids in the garden looking at the bee on the flower and doing a close-up of it, and Mrs. Labassi, their science teacher, was doing plant dissecting at the time, and Mr. Van Harris came through the room and saw community in my room and community in Kelly's room, and everybody said, oh my God, we're doing community too. So it was really neat naturally that the team made that connection. But then we got to the museum and they had a show called Distinguishing Features, and you can see some of the kids with Abby Rivaldi in the museum. But it really gave the kids a sense of how artists look at people, and they got to reflect on it for a great packet that she gave them. And at the same time, I was doing a three-dimensional project with the kids, and they came back and they said, oh, the connection that we made with the artwork and the artwork at the museum was so cool. And then Kelly and I were reading over some of the reflection pieces today from their writing, and they were making these great connections to their artwork in my room, and that's just like a Yahoo moment for a teacher to see that 12, 13-year-old kids can make that connection in their learning. So
I think it was powerful too because the exhibit was based on portraits of people,
from their
which is an interpretation of the Big Read, which was about this immigrant who came and had to make his life here, and so there was that connection there, and they got to really see that those different interpretations of people. But it was also one of the skills that we work on in ELA is the reading and analyzing of visual text. So I think that was also another connection for them to get to see this real life art, not just on a printout that I've made copies of, that people in their community have made, and to be able to analyze it and break it down and talk about what feeling it gives, and make all those connections between art and the ELA standards. So all around, it just kind of made everything come full circle, I feel like, amongst the team and the collaborators. So
I think, and just thank you so much, ladies. I think one of the biggest things that I've gotten out of working with Kelly and Sue with this, Kelly and I had a conversation of a young student who in 5th and 6th grade frequented my office quite a bit. Struggled in the classroom, was not engaged, would kind of be off in the distance. Kelly shared a moment with me as she was planting the marigolds. This student took it amongst himself to every day check on the marigolds to make sure they were watered and to care for them and to take care of them in the classroom. He was engaged. And if that can be a pathway for him to become more engaged or find out what he really wants to do with his life, that's what our business is. Opening up these doors for these students who might never have had these doors or windows open and allowing them to be who they want to be and giving them those opportunities. When you talk about a field trip from an administrative point of view and you send 60 kids out into the community, you get a little nervous. But as you can see by the pictures here, these young men and women were engaged. They were inspired to do something great. And that's what we're here to do every single day. And that's one of the greatest gifts as educators we've been given. The opportunity to inspire and engage students to make them wonderful young adults and give back to their own community. And as the proud principal, as I always say, in the school, the greatest thing coming back from this field trip is how well-mannered, behaved, and respectful they were to the rest of the community members that they encountered that day. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So the way that these all tie in is essentially what the essential beliefs are under the strategic plan. You know, the value of education, creating the right conditions for the learning experiences of students, the quality of those learning experiences, to start thinking outside the box and gearing towards the student's specific needs and crafts rather than what I think is best for the student, or that sort of shoebox mentality of the way we once learned in the classroom. Straight rows, everybody raise their hand, you do what I tell you. That's not learning. That's doing what you're told to do. And I have to say that we would not be able to do this without the wonderful staff that I work with every day. They really are the foundation of the great things that have happened at Coelho and will continuously happen at Coelho. And we want to thank you for the support as the school committee you have given to us and central office has given to us to allow us to do the wonderful things at Coelho that we've been able to do. So that concludes our presentation tonight. We want to thank everybody.
Thank you all for coming. This is the first school spotlight presentation that we've had so far this year, so it was very, very insightful. Well done. I think there's a lot of exciting things going on at your school, and I do, give kudos to you, Principal Bowles, and your staff for embracing the strategic plan and a lot of the new ideas about learning that are involved in them, in the strategic plan. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, to take, the kids always, the question you hear is, how am I ever going to use this in the future? And you've answered that. And you took them out of the classroom and you answered that. And I don't know how a better way to do that than what you've done, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Storrs?
Yeah, one of the things I've always loved about Coelho, having had 2 children go through this school, is what the staff, they think out of the box. Mr. Ben Harris, my son's favorite teacher, because of the out-of-box thinking. He still talks about that project of the figurine, the historical figurine.
We're doing it in 7th grade with the Greek and Roman gods.
Beautiful. And then you add in, the Renaissance fair you did, and I think that really speaks, and it has lasting memories on the kids, so that's a great thing.
Mr. Quinn?
There's just so much to love about what you folks have put together.
Thank you.
I'm thoroughly impressed with what I've seen tonight. It truly embodies what we've asked, and it's a heavy lift to ask to really kind of shift your paradigm from an accountability-based mode to student-centered. Some of this stuff won't show up on the MCAS report. Right. But this is, Ted Sizer talks about learning's the residue that lasts long after the lesson's ended. These are the type of learning experiences that I remember, and leave it to the art department to always come up with these really innovative practices. A fellow historian, myself, Mr. Ben Harris, I appreciate the work that goes in here too. and I think, what's the big challenge moving forward is how does this become the way education is done in Attleboro? That this is just the expectation and the norm, and once we get to that level, which again is a big heavy lift, and you folks are well on your way, that's how we'll know, and the community is going to see our students out there. And I think that's going to help kind of build capacity. We're going to see opportunities to contribute to the community. In hearing with that, the PE program, giving students more agency, I think is what we're really trying to move towards. And I give you a lot of credit for taking that risk and providing the scaffolds necessary for students to be able to do that. So please continue to expand and take risks, and I look forward to the next Spotlight meeting to see how this is growing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all again.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, if I could just say a word. So, you thanked us, but I think really we should be thanking you. Great job really embracing the idea of the strategic plan and inspiring this. I want to go back to middle school. This is some really exciting, some really exciting things that you're doing, and really wonderful outside the box thinking. Just to echo what some of my other members have said, it's great, wonderful job, everybody.
Thank you. And I just to add, I appreciate you thanking us, but it really is a group effort, and it's the community, it's the parents, and it's the students that really allow us to do what we do. The support we have from those three entities, you can't put into words how valuable they are, and that's why we are allowed to do the wonderful things that we do. This is my 5th year here now in Attleboro, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I think the community and the faculty that I get to work with every day, the school committee, the central administrators, we all have one philosophy. It's about the kids. It's about the students. And as long as we keep that focal point, I think we're going to continue to do great things, because we always have done great things. I think for Coelho, our mission was to show the rest of the world the great things that we're doing as we've done in the past. So I think if we keep that sort of pathway, we're going to continue the way we are. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Next on our agenda, Assistant Superintendent Regan and Jean Dyer will be giving us our 2015-2016 assessment presentation.
Thank you very much. At our last meeting, Superintendent Sawyer provided us with an overview of our accountability levels for MCAS and PARC results for this past year. And as promised, tonight we have Jeannie Dyer here, who has prepared an in-depth presentation for us on our results as far as grade level is concerned and specific content area information as well. So she will begin by giving us a brief explanation of some of the terminology that is used. Sometimes it's difficult to understand the difference between CPI and PPI and SGP. So she will definitely explain all that and help us to better understand the results that we have. Thank you, Jean.
Good evening. Last year, after reflecting on 2 presentations that I did to the school committee, one on MCAS and one on PARC, and after reflecting on the questions that arose subsequent to those presentations, I realized that the community and the parents deserve an orientation not only to the scores, but to the way that they report the scores and the terms that are used when they report those scores. So tonight's agenda is rather ambitious in that I'm rolling two presentations from last year into one, adding access and adding the review. And because of the ambitiousness of this agenda, I have a preference for questions taken at key intervals. Yeah, if you switch that. I'll take it. I think I can. Once it's started, I'm fine. So at these key intervals, after every one of those, I can take questions. But of course, if there's something that you really, I bend to the will of the committee at any time. Let's put it that way. All right. So the Department of Education, like any large institution, is very fond of acronyms. Unfortunately, this fondness for acronyms can be a challenge for a parent who goes onto the website and looks at profiles online, because they encounter things like this. Data that's labeled with terms like CPI, SGP, PPI, cumulative PPI, school percentiles. And depending on the metric, 91, 75, 51 can all be good as long as we relate them to what is actually being measured. But you know, that's not readily apparent when we look at the profiles. For example, it would be perfectly understandable that a parent might think a number like 97.8 CPI meant that the average kid in Attleboro got 97.8% correct on some test, and this was a 0 to 100 measure. But the reality is that this is some distance from that particular assumption. So one of the first terms that parents encounter is the CPI, or Composite Performance Index. The definition reads, a 100-point scale used to measure progress toward meeting gap narrowing targets by June 2017. So the number of students at various achievement levels gets multiplied by a factor of 25, 100, 75, 50, 25, depending on the achievement level. They add it all up, and then they divide by the number of students. So it is the average number of points awarded based on achievement attained. So if 100 points is awarded a school, it means that they are proficient or advanced. So I'd like to show you how that actually gets calculated with a real-life example. So this is the grade 10 ELA calculation of the CPI. It really was 97.8. I'd like to draw your attention to the left side of the screen, because the first thing that you might notice is that the first line refers to a span of 40 points. 240 to 280 is a 40-point span, for which references the proficient and advanced scorers. But the next 4 lines refer to 9-point spans that have been divided somewhat arbitrarily into into groups from 200 to 230. So far from being an average of scores, the CPI is a weighted average that is minimizing low scores and amplifying higher ones. And they use this process for each and every subgroup that is reported on. So I admit that Department of Ed is making its efforts to simplify and clarify the web pages at on the profiles page, but they still have some work to do. So the good thing is parents don't really have to worry much about the individual report cards that they're going to receive on Friday. They are in much more manageable terms. But the profiles page does contain terms like these. The next term that I want to talk about is the Student Growth Percentile, or SGP. Now, there's a 10-minute video out there that is really great, but we don't have time for that, so I'm going to sort of cut to a bigger picture of this. It's a measure of growth from one test to another. One of the misconceptions is that a student's growth percentile is how that student compares to all the rest of the kids. That's not really true. It's how that student compares to his academic peers, and that is a fairer measure. It's a median, not an average. So it means that they take scores and they put them in order, descending order, and then they look at the lowest 25%, and they have a middle 50% group, and then they have the highest 25% or so. I'm simplifying a bit, but the main idea is that there's a middle 50% group that represents typical growth. And as the superintendent pointed out in his previous presentation, that's generally a 40 to 60 range for growth. And that's why 51 can be a good score, right? So the next topic that is encountered when going through the profiles page is the gap narrowing target calculations. When judgments are made about whether or not Attleboro has met its target, it's also important to know that the base against which we are compared is chosen also a bit arbitrarily. It was set at 2011. So that year may have been a great year for Attleboro. But then again, it could have been the worst year we ever had. Right? But that is the year on which all subsequent target meeting is going to be tethered. So significant changes in demographics in the next 6 years between 2011 and 2017 are not ever going to be taken account of in once the targets have been set. So annual increments march on inexorably, whether funding is cut, whether demographics change, or whether an inordinate amount of snow falls before the test. If you look at the calculations as they're done there, it shows you that they start with 2011, then they figure out what the difference is between that and 100, that's the gap. And then they divide it by 2 because the goal is to cut the gap in half. And then they add that half to the original, and that becomes the 2017 target. And they divide that half gap into 6 pieces, and that is the increment every year. Now in this case, it's a tiny little increment every year because the ELA at the high school is at such a high performance level. But it can be a sizable difference. It can be much more than the 0.35 I chose for this example. This is an example of how that works out in real life, those calculations. It's a little bit difficult to see the red line on the black, but I tried other combinations with 4 colors and I was challenged, frankly. But what we see is the ELA for all students on the top line tracking right on top of the state. And the last section of that line takes us out to the end of this coming school year where that final target is set. The second pair of lines refers to the students with special needs. And you can see that for this particular year, they not only met their target, they exceeded it. And if nothing goes amiss, there's an indication that they would meet next year's target as well. So what goes into the calculation of a district's progress when you couple it with the performance? What happens when you introduce a rigorous test in the middle of all of this? Does the Department of Ed only look at CPI figures? Not exactly. So we see that the answer to this question lies in the calculation of something that they call the Annual Progress and Performance Index. It's based on 7 indicators which are listed there, and they combine the proficiency from measures in CPI, so you'll see those first 3, with the growth measures for SGP, so those would be items 4 and 5. And then, if you're the high school, they introduce the students who are, crossing that line into graduation by looking at the dropout rate and the graduation rates. When they look at all of these things, they award points, and you get 75 points for being on track. And that's a key figure because this is the case where 75 is a good number. It's not a straightforward average, however. It's a point system where the 75 means the district's on track. We have to note here that 20% of the districts in Massachusetts reach that 75.
How many, what was the percentage?
20%.
It was 20% are at 75 or above, and the rest are below. So that means that the state itself is not meeting the target as a whole of 75. And the superintendent introduced that last 2 weeks ago when he put out, I believe the figure for how many were at level 2 was 62%. You have the 20% at the level 1, and then everyone else was below that. So I'm going to now take you into the actual calculation that resides at the the profiles page and just talk through a little bit, not every line that's there, but talk through a bit about what goes into this. So they look at the CPI, not just for ELA at the high school, of course, but throughout the entire district. And although we saw the high school was certainly meeting its target, would get 75 points, district-wide they give us 50 points. But for growth, we were all meeting target. Then there are things like extra credit. So if you can cut the number of kids on warning, as they did at the high school, you get extra credit. In order for the district to get that, though, everybody has to have that. You have to have that extra credit everywhere. And then there is extra credit for adding to the advanced. And fortunately, as a district, we earned that district-wide. And the same process is followed for math and for science. And then for the high school, as I mentioned before, about graduation rates. There's also something I'd like to point out because it deserves a shout out, and that is that that'll come later actually. Is it there? Yes, it's there. Extra credit for re-engaging dropouts. So the shout out there is for places like the Attleboro community. When they take a student who has dropped out and that student re-engages and is working hard, that earns extra credit for the district. So this all gets added up, divided by the 7 indicators, and you get a number, 64, which we admit is not 75, but as we'll see later, there is reason to be proud of. And last, whoops, did I skip a page? So then we come to the cumulative PPI. I just did annual PPI. Look at the cumulative. You can see there for 2016 that we have 64. Well, it's a weighted average, and they give the greatest weight to the last year. And they add them, they multiply by 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively, and divide by the number of indicators. But in this case, instead of dividing by 10, we're dividing by 7, because in 2015, everybody was held harmless. It was one of those situations with Park. Now, this calculation I put up here because it has an absolute direct bearing on the annual DART comparison that we do, that shows you how we compare based on what we're spending per pupil and what students are achieving in terms of progress and performance. And that's why that is there. And finally, the last term that I'm going to present is that on school percentiles. As you've seen, that cumulative PPI is a weighted average that gives more weight to the most recent year. Well, we have to keep in mind that individual schools can only be compared to schools that are of the same kind. But that can get a little complicated too. So I'd like you to look at the second note there, which says middle in the rest of the state is usually grades 7 and 8, or grades 6, 7, and 8. In Attleboro, though, it's 5, 6, 7, and 8. And elementary is usually K to 6 or K to 5, but in Attleboro it is K to 4. So that raises the question of what is the impact of including something in a score set, because they only have these 5 categories and you're going to get put into one of them, when that's not usually the case, or you're excluded from a set of numbers. An interesting one to think about. And also, and this is really important, a particular school's scores are tied to the geographical area in which it is found. And we have seen communities with wealthy schools, with wealthy communities, with schools in certain areas score really well because of the resources that are made available to students. So you would expect variation from school to school. And then finally, there's something really pernicious about a percentage system, and that is there was always a bottom 20%. They could all be wonderful high scores, but they will always be the lowest 20%. So here's our job for this evening. If I do it right, I will have answered these questions, right? Do APS students perform on a par with other students in the state? Does APS student performance reflect growth over time compared to one's peers? Is APS closing the gap in the performance of subgroups in a timely way? And how does Attleboro score when ranked with other schools? So we're about to look at more actual figures that use these metrics to measure achievement. My goal has not been so far to undermine any faith in figures when I use words like arbitrary. I simply want to provide a context for an informed interpretation of the scores that we're going to look at. So I'm going to come back to these questions at the end of our presentation. So this is an interval where questions I would like to stop for if there are. Are there any questions about the terminology that I have put out there? That point.
3 times. How do they do student growth? Can you explain that? How do they calculate that?
Well, remember that you want me to go into the in-depth piece of, because they do it the same way they do the growth scores for MCAS and for ELA. They they look at the student scores over the last several years. So they might look at how did this student score in MCAS 3 years ago. And then they look at all the kids that got that score on MCAS. And they find a peer. Right. And then the student has another score in the second year, and they look for those peers. Now there is this peer group that forms. So then in the third year, when you have your growth score, they take that growth score and compare it to that peer group. So it isn't a group based on how much you have as resources made available to you, or even whether you're a special needs student or not a special needs student. It's a comparison with like scoring students. Was that sufficient?
I think so. Just for clarification, so in the case of science, which is what we're concerned, it's effectively the group from 2 years ago, or in the case of 8th grade to 5th grade, 3 years ago.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
You went to go that way. I thought you meant how did they do science as if it were different from MCAS.
No, I understand it's the same, but it is effectively scores from 2 or 3 years ago, right, correct? So the 10th grade from 8th grade and 8th grade from 5th grade.
Yes, and those gaps, of course, introduce another area of difficulty making. But they do absolutely swear that their statisticians have this under control and that this is a figure that we can really trust. If we just take it down a step and say we're looking at growth, comparing tests and kids with like grades, it seems more manageable, I hope. But that was a good question, as always.
Mr. Tyler?
As always.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gene, I just have one question. Is there any type of breakdown between the districts of the ones that are able to take this test electronically and ones that are taking a paper version?
Well, this upcoming year, is the introduction of the electronic version in grade 8, but we're talking MCAS right now, and MCAS was paper-based. When I do get to Park, I am going to discuss the issue about the mode of testing and how that can impact one's scores. There have been numerous articles printed on that topic. And that's another great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
Ms. Dyer, does the state provide folks such as yourself with any insight onto how these formulas and how like peers are come up, or is it?
Now, like I said, there is this 10-minute video I love.
Okay.
That's because, and I will make it available to all of you. And I love it because it was developed by the Massachusetts Teachers Association when everybody got confused with what the Board of Ed was putting out. And it does it very well. So I'm happy to share that with you. But it is more in-depth because they show you precisely how. If anybody can.
So it is a transparent process in terms of how these groups are made and the formulas are put together?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
so and I will circulate that.
Thanks.
It's a great little video by the Massachusetts Department of Ed. Thank you. Okay, so, I just shut it off. There you go. We're now going to move to MCAS testing. So last year, 72% of students in grades 3 to 8 took PARC, and 28% took MCAS. That presented a problem because unlike 2015, when it was pretty 50-50 mix, it was a fairly even mix, they were able to make representative comparisons between the two types of tests. It was a complicated statistical procedure, but it was defensible. This year, because the smaller sample of MCAS is too small to make the kinds of representative samples that they wanted, they determined that for PARC they would not have any aggregate achievement levels published for PARC. But we're still with MCAS. I mention that because when I talk about how achievement levels compare to the state, I'm talking MCAS. But you're not going to hear me talk about that with relation to PARC. I have some ways to glean a little information looking at other things to get around it, but that will be the case. So MCAS was given in grade 10 for ELA, in grade 10 for math, and then in grades 5, 8, and 10 for science. The first slide that we're looking at is not talking about CPI or SGP. This one is talking about percentages of students. Each colored bar in every set represents a grade level and the subject that was tested by MCAS. And each set of bars, and there are 5 in a set, each set of bars is clustered around one of 4 achievement levels: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, or warning. So if you add the high school bars together in ELA for advanced or proficient, you see that's 91%. And if you add the blue bars for math, you'll see that that's 80% of our students being proficient or advanced in math. The bars for science show that 70% are advanced or proficient in 10th grade science. But when we turn our attention to grade 8 and grade 5, we might be tempted to say, hey, is there some kind of problem with science here at Attleboro? And that's why we need the next set of slides. Because there isn't any issue with science in grades 5 or 8 that the state doesn't have. They're the same. And what looked like a rather up and down motion when we compared one grade level to the other, what we have here is a parity. There is parity with the state with just a point or 2 difference in each case. When we look at grade 10 ELA, the state and our ELA, we're looking at 91% proficient or advanced. Okay, so when we reflect on the priorities that we give to ELA and to math, where SGP is part of a PPI calculation that's going to get pulled in for accountability, it makes one wonder where there's not a calculus going on that goes, wait a minute, we're not given SGP in, science for certain things, so, are we going to put more priority on ELA and on math? I can't speak to that, but I do know that increased funding, coordination with the introduction of coaches, if that could ever happen, and the new adoption of standards that happened last winter are all factors that would point in the positive direction. It's also useful to look at past performance on the MCAS, because that can reveal whether there are any trends, any longer-term trends. CPIs are used here and on the next slide. So these two slides, when compared, show you simply that over time, ELA has been slightly above that of the state for CPI scores on proficiency, but tracking steadily. And that in the case of math has been every bit as flat in terms of CPI as the state, with the exception of last year. So what happened last year? To their credit, the 10th grade math cut the failure rate in half. The numbers of the percentage of students who were failing went from, I believe it was 6% to 3%. So that was a good thing, and it caused that spike. Plug in or find another power source. This, I have to share with you that this has been a day when technology has been a particular challenge. You may have seen it when I took the picture of that group. But prior to this, Lori witnessed one thing, and there was like five technology things. Oh, and of course the meeting was delayed a bit. So thank you for that quick recovery there. All right, so we're also testing the new order has back up. They have not yet put into the science test the new order of things for science. But that doesn't mean that over the last year and a half, teachers haven't been reworking the curriculum and the units that are involved with that. As teachers prepare, looking at those new units and gearing up for change testing in science, the key things that they really care about are the item in the standards analysis, and I'll take a look at that. But it isn't a certainty that MCAS 2.0 will continue to provide those. And that's because Measured Progress, the organization with whom they have contracted, is connected with Pearson, and it was the switch with Pearson and Park that deprived us of standards and item analysis. So I haven't seen it yet. I hope I'm going to be an optimist, and we'll leave it at that. Whoop, did I go? I went past a growth score. Okay, there we go, sorry. This, I got my inspiration for the way to color this from my superintendent, who had a clearer way of looking at it. When we look at growth, we look at a range around a median. The median is just that where that middle kid is in a long list of scores. But the range around it from 40 to 60 shows what is typical growth. And so I charted for you the typical growth that we saw on ELA and on math in grade 10. And it looks fairly normal, although I will say that the math department is really focusing on that 20% that struggles, with the goal of getting that 37 growth rate back up into the typical growth area. One of the ways that we can fine-tune our performance, and from a perspective of a classroom teacher, the most valued piece of MCAS data to which I referred is the item and standards analysis in the classroom. So I'm going to read this to you so you don't have to stretch your neck over there. But this is a test item that appeared for grade 5. So if the folks at home want to play Are You As Smart as a 5th grader, they're welcome to chime in and do that. So what we have here is a map, and it shows the location of San Francisco, California, and Boston, Massachusetts, and the direction of the ocean current. So you see the cold ocean current off San Francisco and the warm ocean current off the coast, on the east, off the eastern coast. So the question to students, based on this map, how do ocean currents most likely affect the climate of San Francisco and Boston? A, more precipitation falls in San Francisco than in Boston. B, average wind speeds are greater in San Francisco than in Boston. C, average summer temperatures are lower in San Francisco than in Boston. Or D, storms move from east to west in San Francisco and west to east in Boston. Well, I know you folks all know the right answer. Most likely because of that preview that you received in the email. No. But I'm sure folks at home are curious to know that C was the answer. So how do kids in the state do? 39% of the state's fifth graders were able to answer this question. So this was considered a difficult question statewide. And how did we do? 38%. So again, tracking closely with the state. So that is the end of the MCAS portion, which deals with a very limited and a smaller portion of, well, I suppose the high school is a really large group, so I can't say that, but it's grades 10, 5, 8.
Any questions?
Well, this is good. I kind of think if there aren't too many questions, maybe I'm clear.
You are.
I will believe that.
That's what I tell myself. Yeah.
All right, so now we're going over to Park. Attleboro schools, except for the high school, were held harmless for accountability purposes from any negative change that a movement to the more rigorous Park test might have caused, unless they improved. And here I'd like to point out that 2 of our elementary schools moved from level 2 status to level 1. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
Now, for consistency of the way that I'm presenting disparate things, being Park and MCAS, I'm going to use the same kind of chart approach to the data. So I laid out how each of the grades from grade 3 to grade 8 performed on the achievement levels in Park. The only thing is, see, Park's got 5 of them, where MCAS had 4, and the 5 are didn't meet expectations, which corresponds to like a 1, and partially met, approached, met expectations, or exceeded them, and the last exceeded them would be equivalent to a 5. So when you kind of take a step back from this, the most obvious thing that jumps out at you is that the most common score is met expectations, and that when you couple that with exceeded expectations, you get into the 60%, 64, 62% range. And here's where we have to say, well, how come it's lower than MCAS? And the answers is lower statewide because it's a more rigorous test. It's not testing what every baseline 10th grader should know, but rather preparedness for college work in the future. And it's new. You have to throw that in. Yep.
Point of clarification. Now, is this met expectations relative to a larger group? So it's not, is there...
It's a criterion reference. It is promoted as a criterion reference test. And that is why they say 750 is met expectations.
Okay.
But, here's the but. Last year, they had to use this equipercentile calculation in order to take the Park scores and equate them with the MCAS and make this representative sampling. So when they did this, they published that the scaled scores varied across subject and grade level. So that's where this perception that it's norm-based is coming from. But there are cut scores, and they are, right.
But are the cut scores set relative to the 7 states that took this?
Oh, the 7. I didn't hear 7. I'm sorry.
Well,
about that.
what
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of is with MCAS,
right.
The 240 is a 240, right? Now, one of the critiques, at least of the Park initially, was that 750 was equivalent to a cut score of X number of questions correct. Is that still the case?
I think there's a debate on that has caused people to opt out. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but it is a debate, and I would defer to my superintendent.
Just to be clear, even on MCAS, a 240 is not a 240.
Okay.
they take questions that are in common and they look at how those are, and then they use that to help do the cut scores because they have a sense of where it is. So
So is this aimed to try to create a normal distribution, I guess is my question.
Well, the problem is if they make it a total bell curve,
Right.
then it's not exactly criterion referenced, it's totally norm
Okay.
referenced. So they're trying to make it essentially based on standards that they've held, and then they test whether those standards seem reasonable
yeah.
by looking at a normed
Because the
distribution.
questions are different from year to year.
Right.
You know, it's hard to say whether this year's questions were easier or harder than last year's questions.
Yep.
So they do their best to figure that out, and then,
Right.
you know,
It's like a reference.
as Mr. saying, it is supposed to be criterion based, right? So we're trying to say, oh, based on their scores, these guys we know how kids do on,
right?
But they got all these other ones wrong. That suggests to us that these questions were a little too hard.
Okay.
So therefore, they make an adjustment to what a 750 means in terms of a raw score.
Okay.
They do make those adjustments, but they're doing that in an attempt to make sure that from year to year, a 750 is a 750.
Right.
They are trying to get to that, but like,
okay.
You know,
Yeah, the confusion.
we're really getting into how the sausage is made, you know, like.
Right.
And I guess my point, or just the question that I had was, you know, met expectations is a term that somebody defines what proficient is, and we could, you know, set that in a wide variety of ways. What I just wanted to try to narrow in on is, are we trying to, you know, ultimately rank, and are we trying to aim for only a certain percentage of the students meeting expectations? And will that, like you were saying earlier, you know, you could have all excellent schools, but somebody had to be in that bottom 20%, and that's what I was just trying to get at.
If it were norm referenced, that would be the case,
Okay.
but.
But it's supposed to be criterion
Exception, I
referenced.
mean, actually, what we did see in some states was low performance where the typical kid did not meet the expectations of, and so the state actually went around and changed what it was that they would declare would be meeting.
Yeah, Ohio, I think, dropped to a 3, like an approaching expectations, but became, you know, passing.
Exactly, so that was Ohio norming
Right.
a
Okay.
criterion reference test.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, absolutely great question. So, catch up with my notes, we went past that, that's very good. All right, so these are the math, we were looking at ELA Park scores, now we're looking at math. I averaged each set and determined that math is about 3 to 4 percentage points behind ELA. When we look for answers, we look to the state often to see how we're doing, because you're trying to make sense of the school. How does this compare to the state? Park is not giving aggregate achievement level for state performance, or DC is not giving, because DC is not all of the state's kids broke out into the various achievement levels. They will tell you that most of them met expectations or exceeded them, but they're not going to give you that breakdown because of the statistical problem that they have. So I got to figure out a way to get a little more insight on all of this. So one of the things I thought is, well, hey, we had Park last year, and last year we knew how we compared to the state. So let's compare this year to last year. So at first this seemed like a really genius idea. So I put out there the comparison between 2015 and 16, and roughly you can see there's very little difference between the 2 years. Some grade levels went up and some went down, but if you average them, they're the same. Except there's a problem with this, because the MCAS in 2015 was not the MCAS in 2016. 2015 had these 2 sections. It had the performance-based assessment, had the end-of-the-year assessment, had algebra separated out. I mean, there were all kinds of things going on with that, and this was a more simplified due to complaints about the time dedicated to testing. And so I can't really swear to this, but it did seem a reasonable approach. And it would suggest that, given that the prior year was favorable in relation to the state, and given that this set is comparable, that it would be likely that there was some parity with the state. But that's an untested hypothesis, because I could also say maybe they all did better in their second year of taking, you know, or worse, so. Fair? Okay, so that takes us into if I didn't skip one, because of my page in front of me, right? The park growth scores. So again, I had that colored rectangle in the background. Again, you can see that no matter the grade, grade 3 is not in there because they don't have SGPs for grade 3 because the kids are just starting out. But you can see that for all the grades, their growth scores are falling within the normal target, with one exception. And if you look at grade 7, they're like through the roof in ELA, which was marvelous. So, excuse me, supper coming back. Now, to attack these variations in student growth, I know that Lori was going to share a bit about PD and what we're doing with that.
Specifically for science this year, we've collaborated with Cambridge College, and they're providing us with our targeted PD for teachers in grades actually K through 8. They'll be presenting different lessons and units for teachers to start to incorporate some of the new standards into their daily lessons, and then start to think about how they want to rewrite and put together some of their units for that specifically.
Good. I want to go back to one set of scores, because I promised to answer a question that I didn't answer, and I intended to answer it here. And the question was Mr. Quinn's on the mode and its impact on testing. So you will see that the CPIs for the grades 3 and 4 were lower than the other grades. And this is where it is important to note that grade 3 and 4 tested online, and that the other grades had the, it was his question.
Mr. Tyler's, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a good question, though.
I should give credit where it is due.
Yeah.
All right. It is posited, especially given the number of articles that came out that said that online test scores were lower than paper-based test scores, that may be the reason for grades 3 and 4. So I'm at the end of the park section. Any questions on park?
Sure. Thank you. Since you had mentioned the online testing, if memory recalls, there were issues with
Yes.
online testing.
Bill Roberts, I remember.
Can you speak to that? Because I can't see how that would not have affected the test scores.
Well, I mean, I believe that these things impacted the test score. I wasn't in the actual schools where things went awry, but I did hear reports that there was something like, 40-minute delay before all the technology could get synced. But then again, one could argue that once the test began, the amount of time that was allotted was the time allotted. You might put yourself in the role of a 3rd or 4th grader as a little kid, and everything went wrong for the first 40 minutes, and maybe it does have an impact on your next 40 minutes. It's a debate that people have had. There is one side that says technological issues had a minor impact, so says the commissioner. But then you have a principal in a school where everything went wrong, saying, I beg to differ. But that was the first year, and we know that as we go forward, and to the credit of this administration, we are building in more and more online testing. ELA, I know that Lori can talk about School City, and math. We're building in online tests for our DCAs, our District Common Assessments. So they're used to it. Even if it is lower scoring initially, when we get to 2019 and everybody's doing it, our kids will have had sufficient practice and familiarity with it.
I think the important piece here is that it's not just about being able to take a test on the computer. It's about using a computer daily, and how you can use it to research information, how to answer questions, how to put together presentations, how to prepare them for your classroom, and then how to transfer all of that learning that you've used and utilized on the computer into a testing environment. We do have a testing environment platform that students are using right now. They've been using it in grades 3 and 4 for the past couple of years, and this year we're transitioning to start for the 8th graders because one of the state's recommendations this year is for us to have online testing available for 4th grade and 8th grade. So we've transitioned to having the 8th grade take their assessments in ELA online this year.
That's good. Okay. So now we're going to move to access for ELL. Children for whom English is a second language must take a test called Access. It's new. The version that we have for this year is new, and there are some key points about the Access test that I put up there. If, in order to engage students and provide more reliable results, Access also switched to online testing. They also changed the way that scores are screened. It used to be that the local test administrator would score the test. Now there's an instrument that scores that test for them, and that removes certain issues about objectivity from the mix, I guess. There were about 385 ELL students tested. Not all of those get reported because it depends on what year, if they're in the first year or not. But these children are tested on listening, speaking, reading, and writing, much like foreign language, with which I'm very familiar. And their proficiency levels are 6 levels. We saw 4 levels in MCAS, we saw 5 levels in PARC, and now we have 6 levels in Access. They're all a different mix. But the key is to focus on, they come in entering, at entering level, they proceed through all 6 until they have reached a level of literacy and expanding or bridging levels. And if you look at the bottom legend, you will see that that's the 4th and 5th levels. And then at the high school, there's a significantly higher percentage of students who are reaching the highest level of proficiency, called the reaching level. And again, in grade 9, you may see new entrants from other countries with, coming in at the entering stage. Now, before I move out of Access, I want to point out that changes in training and in licensure have been happening. The acronym is SEI for Sheltered English Immersion, and it requires that core academic teachers who have any ELL students in their classroom must earn this new licensure endorsement by July 2017. So this new endorsement requires lots of training, and teachers are trained in UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and academic vocabulary, how to work with a diverse cultural group. Lori, did you want to mention about SIFE?
So you might be wondering why there's some purple there on the graph for grade 9 in that chart. We do have students that come into Attleboro High School and they're coded as SIFE or SLIFE, students with interrupted formal education. So they're coming from other countries who didn't have formal education in their own country and come here to learn English. So we have sent some teachers to be trained in different strategies to support these students in the classroom and to get them up to speed as quickly as possible.
Okay. Any questions on Access? I'll pat myself on the back here. All right, so now we're going to look at narrowing the gaps. And this is the key metric for measuring the gap with subgroups versus the body as a whole is called the Cumulative Progress and Performance Index that I mentioned before, alias the cumulative PPI. And it is a component of accountability. That was the primary topic of the superintendent's presentation 2 weeks ago. And I'm going to rely on it when I look at how we compare to the 10 of us in a group for DART. So to review quickly, more schools in Attleboro were level 1 in narrowing the gap than in the prior year. Only 20% of the districts in the state have district level 1. If just one school in a district with 25 has a level 2 and everybody else has level 1, that's a district of level 2. That's how they work it out. And the gap narrowing target was 75, which they don't meet. So here's how Attleboro looks. The y-axis on the left goes from the lowest per pupil cost to the highest per pupil cost. The x-axis is the cumulative PPI, and it's showing lower progress and performance near, on the left side of that x-axis, and it moves to higher progress and performance as it moves toward the right. So the first thing that jumps out at us is that purple circle up there at the top. That's Cambridge, where they spend $27,000, I gotta read it here, $27,569 per pupil to get their level 2 status with a PPI of 67. And then, for a moment, I was worried because I thought Methuen had beat us out in this race to be the best performing and least expensive school of the 10, but no, because if you look carefully, Methuen is level 3, right? So, best in show again. This has been an annual piece of information we share with you, and I thought it an appropriate way to come to the second to the last slide in this presentation. And I think you have a lot to be proud of as a school committee for being able to get so much with what is available in terms of funding for our schools. So, very appreciative. So, remember those questions I asked at the beginning? We've come around to the end. Do our students perform on a par with other students in the state? Well, when the state tells us what that is, the answer is yes. Does student performance reflect growth over time compared to one's peers? We saw when we looked at SGP what was typical growth. And we saw that for the most part, students were falling within typical growth. And where we noted they were different, we've advised you of what the plan is to deal with that. Are we closing the gap in performance of subgroups in a timely way? The superintendent had a slide last time that showed, yes, we're closing the gaps. And when we compare that to the target, not everybody's meeting the target. So I would say yes, but, as an answer to that. But remember, ESEA, which was No Child Left Behind, ends in 2017, and ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, begins in 2018, and they're revamping accountability with a greater emphasis on the whole child. So that's an important thing to think about. And how do we score when ranked with other schools? A lot of bang for the buck. Questions?
Mrs. Doris?
The first part, I just want to say, I think it's very important to note, although you mentioned how 20% of the state is level 1, not one of the comparable districts to Attleboro is level 1.
Right.
I think that's very important to
Yep.
point out, which means we are at the top of our comparables. And I think that's very important. But my question has to do with MCAS 2. I know things are changing. Could you speak to that a little bit and how that's going to affect things going forward?
Actually, I'm ill prepared to speak about MCAS 2, but if anybody's sitting here is better prepared, because it's not finished yet. I mean, you asked me to talk about a product that hasn't been delivered, and I know what the plans are,
that's what I'm looking
but
for.
the problem is the devil's in the details, and when you actually get into, are they purchasing items from Park? Are they taking, how much of a mix with Park and MCAS? I mean, it's really, but I'd be happy to share all literature that I receive on this topic and update where possible.
Just to add a little bit, we do have some teachers that are on the assessment development
Oh, good.
committees with the with the state and participating in creating those assessments for us. The state is releasing some sample items and sample tests after the new year for us to take a look at and to see what they hold. So
Do we expect that to go into effect for next year?
the MCAS 2.0,
Yeah.
it'll be for spring of 2017. Yeah.
Yep, yep. But it does bring up the issue of what are we going to do with comparisons when we have MCAS 2.0 and then the revamped park and then the prior park and then before that MCAS. So a longitudinal view of how we're doing. We have to trust in what we're doing. You build relationships with children. You draw connections with the real world, and you help them make a personal engagement with, you know, what they care about and what it is they're doing. If we do that, good things will happen.
Yeah, to tie this back to what we saw earlier tonight, you know, Coelho did a great job of showing all the things that they're doing to make, you know, their middle school experience for their students, you know, much wider than just a narrow focus on English and math achievement. And yet, they're still getting results. They're still, I mean, they're a level 1 status. They're proof of the claim I make all the time, which is that if we do the right things, the scores will take care of themselves.
Mr. Quinn?
To your knowledge, and you may not be able to answer this off the cuff, but we've talked oftentimes that the biggest predictor of our achievement scores, or achievement scores in general, are socioeconomic status. Would you say that, if you had to generalize here, that our achievement scores are at least consistent with our socioeconomic, or in some respects above where it would be projected?
Well, I'm only talking suspicions because I haven't,
Right.
you know, I haven't run the numbers, but that would be a reasonable conclusion based on what we're seeing for what we're doing. I mean, to be on a par, the question would be, where does Attleboro lie in comparison with the state in various indicators of, you know, economics?
Mhm.
And I don't have those at the top of my head. I think you probably have a better sense of you know, how close to the median Attleboro is. My perception is that there are fewer resources available in Attleboro than
I mean,
other places.
Ms. Dyer is wise to, you know, not go too far on the limb, although we haven't, you know, really looked carefully at the numbers behind this, but just to oversimplify it, you know, Attleboro's demographics are 45% high needs, and we're getting better than average results on the test. So, in the simplest terms, I think that answers the question.
And I think the reason why I asked that question is my suspicion is that that's the case, and that when we look at state average, I think what we have to take into context is the demographics that we have in the student population. I also think that, you know, to your point, Superintendent Sawyer, that if we wanted to just close the gaps, but through test prep measures and cut out the trips to the art galleries to make learning less relevant and less engaging, I'm sure that we could do that. But I'm not sure that if you tried to transfer those skills that are assessed on the test and then put them into an authentic environment, I'm not sure that they would translate, because it's hard to, you know, divorce a score from the measure that you're using. So I commend Assistant Superintendent Regan when you were talking about using the computers for more than just test prep. I think that's critical when we talk about a cost-benefit analysis of, you know, closing somewhat arbitrary gaps.
You've been kind to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very thorough and
I only ran 10 minutes over. I said it would be an hour. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on to our subcommittee reports, Mrs. Scales.
Just one thing, just making everyone aware that we are removing from the table the following policies that will go into immediate effect. And that is policy JF residency and policy JFE1 proof of residency.
Thank you. Mr. Tyler, infrastructure and facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we did have a meeting on September 28th. We held our meeting at Hill Robert Elementary School, actually a very beautiful school. Same agenda items we've been talking about for quite a while. The boilers are original to the building, and they're in need of replacement drastically. They were retaped a couple of years ago. The air conditioning in the thing is the original air conditioning with school, and those units are failing. And again, it's one of those schools where you cannot open windows. So again, you're in kind of a catch-22 here. The cost to address the air conditioning, the boilers, and the gym floor is about $500,000 per building. That is a sister building of Hyman Fine. They're both the solid block, really stable buildings, but again, the original boilers and air conditioners for these. So it is time. It was brought to our attention, it's the opinion of the administration that city is waiting for Brennan and Wamsutta to be eligible for the MSBA. So basically, they're getting up to the 20 years. So it's their interpretation that that's what the administration is waiting for. The administration and the city council is well aware of the condition of the major items in these buildings. It's just, they've been on the capital improvement list for years and years. They've been on high priority. They've never gotten funded. So again, we're sitting in the same boat, but we just want to keep telling people that there is a real likelihood, if it wasn't for the hard work of Jason, Jeff Russo, I'm sorry, Jason and his maintenance staff, piecing these things together, we'd be in big trouble. So eventually, something's gonna break, and we're gonna be closing the school down for a day or two, if not longer, and the costs are only gonna escalate because the damage that's going to be caused after a boiler breaks down. So we're just trying to keep bringing this back up on the subject. There was a promise of about $20,000 to do some kind of patch issues with some of these by the city administration. And there was talk about whether or not I should be having a discussion with the chairman that we would be putting as a school committee, maybe going into the revolving accounts once they've been certified. To see if that's a short-term avenue until we can actually get the funds from the administration to address these. Again, they're doing so much work on these buildings to keep them up, and we appreciate all the work they're doing, but all you need is a rough winter and a boiler go down, or a hot summer and have your air conditioning go down, and there's no way that these schools will be able to be open during that time. The last thing on our agenda that we talked about was the concession stand. There was a couple items that were brought to the schools about the Booster Club that they needed changed in there. One was the sink in the main concession stand, and there was a couple other items. Those have all been taken care of, and we believe that thing is fully up and running. And that, Mr. Chairman, is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. Mr. Quinn, teaching and learning?
Yes, we met on the 3rd. We had 6 items on our agenda. The first was the student engagement video documentary that was put together, which, if I may boast, was one of the most authentic, real, positive, but honest videos I've seen coming out of the school district. It's on social media. I would encourage anybody in the community to take a look, because I think it took a honest look at where we are in terms of student engagement, and it starts to map where we need to go. And I think it took a lot of courage to investigate that. I think sometimes districts want to believe that they're engaging students, but don't necessarily ask them. I would strongly recommend to take the 11 minutes. This was a student-produced video. Students came in on their summer break. They didn't receive a grade for it, so this was all the intrinsic motivation that we're trying to tap into, and it was really something wonderful. This also ties into another item on our agenda, which is a screening of most likely to succeed. We've been talking about that for a while, and we're really starting to gain some momentum where I think we're going to be able to have a much larger community-based discussion within the coming months, about the film and where we want to go in showing it. Another item on the agenda was the lab has been working on the development of their assessments and what goes into the learning competencies, or basically what we want our students to know and be able to do by the time they graduate, particularly preparing them for a 21st century citizenry and economy. So the lab is in the process of developing and defining what those terms look like in the assessments and how we're going to measure and capture that. We also had an update on the substitute teacher manual. One of the advisory boards also put that together to give guidance for folks who are coming into the community to help continue the learning process when they're a substitute. I thought the advice was really well put together. It was comprehensive, and the team that put that together did a really nice job. And then finally, we talked about some emerging partnerships that we have with our local colleges and universities. Bridgewater State has been an active partner with Attleboro Public Schools, bringing in some STEM initiatives, some leadership trainings for our teachers. We also have a partnership coming up with Cambridge College that will also help the professional development of our teachers as well. Ms. Regan, there was one other piece of news, positive news that came out in that meeting. Would you like to share with that?
Sure. We did apply for the after-school and enrichment grant, school activities grant, and out-of-school activities, and we did receive it. So we have $20,000 to use between the 3 middle schools for after-school programming.
And while the craziness of the last couple months have been going on, as short-staffed as they've been, the central office came together and put together this grant that while it was a very painful cut for after-school program, they were looking for ways to figure out opportunities or different pathways to restore that. So I think they should be commended for their efforts to do that, and I thank them. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Mr. Larson, Finance and Budget.
We had a meeting last week. We have 2 motions to bring forward to the full committee. Both are more housekeeping. The first is that I'd like to entertain a motion to send to the City Council for their approval list of invoices for prior year FY16 so they can be paid.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I believe you all had a list provided to you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. And then I'd like to entertain a motion to have the school committee approve Mr. Furtado's request for a budget transfer, worksheet dated September 26, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. We'll be having a meeting next month. I'll let people know. And that's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, that'll conclude open forum. Next, the Attleboro School Committee will convene an executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 2 and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with union personnel and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, respectively, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. The school committee will not reconvene in open session. Mr. Storrs?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
All right, we'll take a 2-minute recess.